Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tech Art for All. I want to thank you for coming back and taking a look at yet another lesson in mail scripting. I hope that up to this point, you guys are really kind of enjoying the process and realizing that this stuff is actually pretty easy. If you do find yourself being frustrated, please leave me a comment and kind of explain why you're frustrated. I would love nothing more than to either help you get through some kind of struggle in the process or to clarify something for you. So please, guys, don't hesitate. Um, we've come to a point where I think we're ready to start learning how to work with if statements. The way I think about if statements is they're kind of like these huge gates which you know make a certain inquiry about the state of a variable or and whether the that question, whether the answer is true or false or some combination of the two, the gates either keep closed or they open up and let the code continue to specific part or specific lines of code. So it's at least that's how uh, you know that's how I think about them. So let's get started. I'm gonna show you the desktop and open up the script editor, and let's talk about if statements. So I'll first show you a very simple example. I'm going to create a new variable, int variable. Is true, and I'm going to set it to 1. There are some languages out there that have a different variable type of that's called a boolean, and it's literally true or false. Inside of Maya, you don't have a specific boolean type, but you normally use a variable of type int, and you give it a 1 for true and 0 for false. And inside of Maya, actually, some people don't know this, but inside of Maya, 0 and 1 also mean on and off. So for example, if I create this little tidbit, let's say a directional light. Okay, so these nodes have the on or visibility attribute, and I see a lot of people typing like on or off, but you can actually simply just hit 0 for off and 1 for on. And I think that's really kind of cool shorthand version of off and on. So, and inside of Mel, so 0 and 1 doesn't necessarily mean true or false, but people, when they script, they think of 1 as true and 0 as false. And so if I type, for example, I'm going to create this if statement or a gate that tests to see if is true variable is set to 1. So I'm going to type if, and then I'm going to open parenthesis, and I'm going to say is true. And when you're comparing two values or a variable and a value, you use the double equal sign, because a single equal sign is assignment. So here in this case, I'm assigning 1 to the variable is true. But for a comparison, if you want to see if something's equal, you use the two equal signs. Is equal to 1. And I'm going to open the squirrely bracket and close it. And basically what that creates is it creates a block. So whatever is inside this block will only get evaluated if this statement is true in this case. And I'm going to say, so if is true equal to 1, I'm going to print yes, it is. So once again, to go over this example, I'm going to make an int variable called is true. I hit enter. Okay, that's great. And then I have an if statement or a gate that checks to see if is true is actually set to 1, which it is. So if I execute this if statement with the print inside its block, you can see that yes it is, got printed. On the other hand, if I make this 0, so in this case, this if statement is checking if isTrue is set to 0, which it's not, it's set to 1. It should ignore it. And here it is. It ran, it didn't give me an error, it just never printed yes it is, because the if statement was checking to see if isTrue is 0, but it's actually 1. But if I go up here and set it to 0 and run the same block, all of a sudden it starts printing yes it is once again. The other thing that you can do in an if statement is add a else block. So it's a way to check something, and if it's not true, then else do something else. So the way you do that is right after the if statement you type else, then you create a new block, and inside of that I'm going to print no it's not. No it's not. Maybe add a little sad face, why not? So once again, in this case, isTrue is equals to 1. And then here we're going to test, hey, is true equal to 0? And so in this case, hopefully it's not. And then when we run the if statement and the else block, the if block and else block together, we would expect, or I would expect, the no it's not to be printed, because we just set isTrue to 1. And here it is. It's printing no it's not. So the way it evaluates is true, which is currently set to, oh, let me clear that out. What's going on? Is set to 0. Oh, sorry, it's set to 1. And so we're basically saying, like, hey, is 1, what is that? That is super strange. Ignore that for a moment. I'm not sure what's going on with that. So is true, which is 1, equal to 0? It's not, so this will be ignored. But then there's an else, so it continues to else, and it basically says, if this first part is ignored, then definitely do this part, which prints no it's not. And like I said, there it's working. So the other comparison operators you can use is, so you can use, I'm going to make a comment, equal equal is checks if both sides are equal. You can do not equal, which, so this exclamation means not. So exclamation equal means checks if both sides are not equal. There is the more than, checks if left side. So this, so the comparison operators you can use with strings as well, if you want to compare two strings if they're identical or not identical. But I believe these greater or less than you can't use unless it's, you know what, let's try, we'll try it in a second. Checks if left side is bigger than right side. Then there's the less than, checks if left side is smaller than right side. Then there's the less than or equals, checks if the left side is smaller or equal to the right side. So it's kind of like this one and this one combined. So we'll go through the examples. And then there is the greater than or equals, and checks if the, oops, let's make this left side. Left side is greater or equal to the right side. So let's look at examples of that. I'm going to copy this block below here. So we'll make is true 1, and then we're going to check if is true is not equal to 0. So in this case, is true is 1, so 1 is not equal to 0, so this block is going to be the correct block, and it should print yes it is. And once this is true, it never continues to this block. So let's run that, and here it's printing yes it is. So it found out that it's not equal. And then we can see, like, hey, is 1 more than 0? Once again, this should be true. Let's run that. Yes, it is. So it's either bigger or equal to 0. It's actually bigger. And then we can check, hey, is it less than or equal? And in this case, if you take a quick guess, what do you think it should print? Hopefully you all guessed no it isn't, because 1 is not less than 0, and it's not equal to 0. So let's run that. And yeah, see, it's printing no it's not. This is great, it's working. Let's do, and it's the same thing for the less than or greater. It's just it doesn't check if they're equal. And you might think, like, hey, is this less than or greater than and equal actually useful? And you'll find out later on through your experience of writing these scripts that it's actually quite useful. The other thing you can do is actually you can stack these if statements, and you can do it by adding another else and then if statement. So we can do, let's say, less, and here we'll do equals. So basically the way this would work is, if you have the else by itself, it automatically gets executed if the first part is not true. If you have another if statement after the else, then if the first block is not true, it then continues to the second block, but here it will do another if, basically another comparison of the two values on both sides of the double equal sign in this case. So let's run that. And as you can see, it didn't print anything. And the reason is because this is not true, so it didn't print this block. And then it continued to the next block, and here's another if statement. And this if statement happens to be not true as well, so it never printed the second block. By the way, the way I'm creating these blocks, it's like, this is my preference. This is the way I do it. Some people might look at this and cringe. There's people who write it like this. There's people who prefer to do it this way. So it's kind of up to you how you format it. The result is the same. It's whatever you prefer, whatever your team prefers. If there's already guidelines that have been set up. So you might also notice that if your if statement only has one line after it, you can ignore the curly brackets altogether, and this will still run. But just, I recommend not doing that, because as soon as you add another line, so for example, I'm going to add 2 lines. If you have 2 lines that you want to be executed by an if statement block, if you don't have the curly brackets, only the first line will be considered part of the if statement. The second line will just, I think, will be, it will work as if you have it set up like this. So just something to watch out for. Like I said, even if I have one line, I tend to add the curly brackets just because it's cleaner, and then you always end up adding more lines to blocks, and this way it just kind of automatically works. But do know that, also if you have one line, the first line that follows an if statement whether you have the brackets or not is considered part of that if statement. So just something to be aware of. And all this indenting I'm doing, that's more for readability. Even if I, if I remove the curly brackets in this case and I don't indent, everything should still... Oh, wait, why didn't that work? Oh, because I have this guy. So I just removed the curly brackets and it's still, running without error. But look how messy this looks. You want to make sure that your code is as clear as possible, not only for yourself, but for other people on the team, or future tech artists that may join the team. So let me think if there's anything else about the if statements. Oh yeah, and then you can, if you want, you can, if it's necessary, you can keep adding as many, else ifs as you need to. Oh, here's another thing that's pretty useful. When you write an if statement, you can also stack these if tests by using an and operator. So I can say like if, okay, let me add the curly brackets in. This is pretty useful stuff. Let me reformat it so that it's clean. So you could say if is true is less than 0, or let's make it true actually. And so this is going to be true, right? But then you can say and is true less than 5. So in this case, what the Mel compiler will do is it will, you're making is true 1, and then it will test this. Is true, is it equal to 1? Yes, it is. If it is, it will then notice this like double and operator, and basically then it says like, oh, but it also has to be something else, and that next thing is it less than 5? In this case it is, and if we run it, it should type yes it is. But if either one of these is not true, this will not get evaluated. For example, if I change this to 0, and it's going to check is true, which is 1 equal to 0, it's not. Once it hits this like, okay, this is not true, it will never continue, and it will just break out of this block and continue on with the script if you have additional lines at the bottom. So when I run this, nothing happens. Same thing with this. If I say, hey, is 1 less than 1? Also false. So in this case, this will be true, but then the next thing is false. And once again, it halts and breaks out of this block. So if I run this, also nothing got printed because this portion of it is not true. So the other operator you can use is the OR operator, and it's these two vertical lines. If you hit Shift and the button under the backspace, it will create a vertical line, and you just make 2 of them. So whenever you see 2 vertical lines like this in Mel, it means OR. So the difference between and OR is that OR will execute this block if either one of these are true or both of them are true. So in this example, if is true equals 1, and let me clear that. If is true is equal to 1, then it's true. And because this is an OR sign, it doesn't even have to continue to this one, because either one of those, if they're true, what is that? It's so strange. If either one of it is true, this gets executed. So in this case, this is already true. This gets executed. This one never even has to go into effect. But if this one is false, then it sees like the OR and goes, oh, you know what? This is false, but let's see if this one's true. Let's change this to 2 so that it becomes true. So now it goes, is true equal to 0? No, it's not, but it sees the OR operator. And so it checks for the second comparison, which is true. And if it is, it goes like, okay, cool, one of them is true, so That's great. Let's run the block. So if I execute this, yes, it is came up because the second portion is true. And of course, you know, you will get some complicated cases where you have to use and operator, comparison operator, and the or comparison operator as well. And then, you know, the logic could get kind of tricky because you have to like, it's kind of like, you know, a lot of it is kind of like actual, you know, real language comprehension. You're kind of creating this, you know, sentence in your head and going like, hey, if this and this is true, okay, that's something that we can actually comprehend in English. It translates to a similar thing. Same thing with or. Hey, if either one of these is true, continue executing the block that's associated with this if statement. And, you know, like I said, these could go on and on and on and on. So I think at this point this video is probably long enough. If you have any questions about the if statements, you know, this is where we're starting to get a little bit more complicated, but I hope you still feel in control and understand what's going on. And as with anything, it requires a little bit of practice on your end. You know, try different things. At this point, you know, try creating different variables. Try using strings. Try using ints and floats and do these operations. And if, you know, hopefully get results that make sense. If you're not sure why something's working a certain way or the result is unexpected, leave me a comment with the example and we'll go over it in the next video. Thanks again for joining and hope you have a nice day.